Hi, my name is Rachel, and welcome to my channel, La Brick or Lose. This video is an episode of the series Costume Professionals, Making a Living, Making Costumes. In it, I interviewed Denise Chukhina, who earns a living making custom cosplay costumes for clients all over the United States.
Here is an example of Denise's work, a cosplay inspired by Jaime Lannister's armor in the TV series Game of Thrones.
Welcome and thank you for joining me today. Tell us about your company, Skeleton Key Cosplay.
Yeah, absolutely. I create custom bespoke cosplay costumes for customers upon request. Oftentimes people will write into me asking for a specific character from a certain fandom or a movie or a TV show. So the design aspect has already been done, but they want the costume to be produced, made specifically for their measurements. I start a dialogue with them around screen accuracy, what level of detailing that they want. I try to work on the higher end of things. I really like to delve into details and get it as clean and accurate looking as possible. Some people aren't as focused on that. They just kind of want to wear the costume just to have it for photos and just for having fun, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. I just personally really like to do hand sewing and dyeing of fabric and making everything really detailed and clean looking.
Are you the only employee of the company, or do you have staff or bring on freelance assistants?
I have in the past another classmate from UNC, Candy McLaren. Sometimes she and I have worked together to finish a costume. I had a costume 2 summers ago that I had to finish in about a week. And so I called her expertise to help me to, bust it out and still produce something that was quality. I do all the social media. So I do marketing, I do the business end, I keep track of receipts and all of that. I make the costumes, I ship, and I'm customer service. So I'm wearing all of the hats. Yeah, I'm looking into finding ways to hire, definitely to help with like the business end of things so that I can process orders quicker. So.
Now, do you make 100% of the costumes that you're contracted to create?
Like a potential customer will be sourcing a costume from different makers depending on what, I guess, substrate it is. So a lot of people will come to me specifically for sewing. It seems like there's a formula from what I'm seeing from people reaching out. There's like a helmet, there's boots, there's the soft parts, they call it. Lucasfilm calls them greeblies. It's like whatever little like metal looking bits will be on a costume. So I tend to outsource something that is clearly a 3D printed item.
So, my next question is about your career trajectory. Can you walk us through how you went from your initial love of costumes up to the point where you have a company building custom cosplays for clients?
So it's funny because I grew up, going to Renaissance fairs and I loved Halloween as a kid. So in undergrad, I studied costume design, which I didn't realize you could do until I got to undergrad. When was my first convention? Because I made that Duchess costume as a part of one of my undergrad classes.
This is the piece that Denise is referring to, a cosplay of Keira Knightley in the film The Duchess. She brought the gown to her interview for graduate school as an example of her work, and while in the graduate program, made the hat, the muff, and a pair of boots.
But I think it was in 2012 was the first time I went to a convention and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but this is really exciting because I love Halloween and this is nice that I have an outlet for my desire to wear costumes more than just once a year. I remember going through the grad program and not having a plan for afterwards, and that was, sort of terrifying. And I've always had it in my head that I wanted to run my own business. Going through the UNC program was so great because it really helped me understand patterning, proportions, shapes, and I think running a business, we had costume management classes.
I'd love it if you could tell us about your studio space.
My current studio space, which is behind me, is in my home. I live in a condo. I took over the master bedroom, but now that we have a child, we're moving me out of this studio, and we bought a second condo, and I'm using one of the bedrooms in that condo as my studio space. So it's conveniently really close next door. We have the rest of the house space to just be a home, which is going to be great to have a separation of work life and personal life.
You're a new parent. Can you speak to how you balance working full-time as a costume maker and working full-time mothering a toddler?
My husband and I both have been working from home. I mean, I would be working from home regardless, but now with him home as well, we're both always there, and he's kind of gotten used to the flow of the day. Like this time, mama's hanging out with you and papa's over there doing his work, and then we'll switch over at some point in the afternoon. Oftentimes he comes in and has to show me something or wants to bring me into their playtime. And since I'm creating my own schedule, I have a lot more flexibility in being able to do that. That's actually a big reason why I wanted to do this business, because I love making costumes. I always knew that I wanted to have a family. I've heard stories from people who have had families while also being in theater. There's just a lot of work that you have to do. If you've got an infant, especially, it's like, oh, well, I've got to breastfeed my child, or, I have to change a diaper.
Now, when the COVID-19 pandemic struck and the costume making industry worldwide shut down with the performing arts, no theater, no opera, no ballet, no film and television, no conferences, no conventions like Dragon Con, and many of us were sidelined by that, but you weren't. Can you talk about how your business weathered the pandemic?
Yeah, I've been amazed and very thankful for the work that I was given. I think it was just a perfect storm of people being stuck at home. And even though there weren't conventions, I think people just were holding out hope for the future. Yes, we miss being in giant crowds of people and seeing friends socially, but we do get to still get dressed up and share that with each other online. Even if we can't see each other face to face, we can still appreciate, people dressing up from afar. I don't know if it had anything to do with stimulus checks. A lot of people reached out to me to make them a custom costume. A lot of costumers were out of work, and I was overflowing with work. I even had classmates from grad school asking me for advice on how to break into the cosplay world. So it just was really bizarre for me to reflect on my anxiety in grad school of like, oh God, what am I going to do after I graduate? And then being in this place where it's like other people didn't have work.
What advice would you have for cosplayers who are considering transitioning their cosplay practice from a hobby to a career like yours?
If a person is already a cosplayer and wants to break into the commission world, it's pretty easy to network. People will ask a cosplayer if they do commission work. Like, it's part of the culture a bit. I think I found the most success finding like Facebook groups that are niche to what I wanted to make. I started off with the Rey Cosplay Facebook group. I started learning about how to make her costume screen accurate.
Here's Denise wearing that Rey costume. She put so much effort into researching.
It looks like a simple costume. I've made like 4 different pairs of her pants from the first movie, and I'm still not happy. This should be simple. Anyways, after figuring out how to make her costume really well, I posted photos of myself. I'm really excited about this costume that I made. I wanted to share it with you. I am open to making these as commission pieces. So that started building up interest. Once I started making a few Rey costumes, people were like, oh, well, if you can make Rey, can you make this other character from Star Wars? And so it just sort of grew from there. And
here's an example of another of Denise's cosplays from the Star Wars universe, Padme Amidala. She has also made Han Solo, Jedi Temple Guard uniforms, Ewoks, and many more.
How can you improve your skill set as a cosplayer, particularly if you don't have the time, the money, or the inclination to get an undergraduate or a graduate degree in costume production?
I think it really depends on the maker and what their end goal is, what their interests are in. And I've learned so much from the cosplay community. There's so many people who make amazing tutorials. You know, people have written books. I'll spend a lot of time just on either Instagram or Facebook, and I'll just be looking at different makers who make things that I want to make and read what they're saying about it, how they made it. Sometimes I'll ask them a question, putting all this information sort of in a data bank of okay, this is how you make it. But something like armor, like I'm making a Wonder Woman costume for myself. I sort of used that as a learning experience for me to better understand how to do foam and thermoplastics. If they really do love sewing, finding out information on patterning and sewing is where you're going to want to go.
So you're a cosplayer yourself. Can you speak to how wearing a cosplay affects your personality?
I feel so uncomfortable with like improv situations, but I think of like what actors say when they put on a costume. They're like, that's when I really felt like the character. Like Zoya is such a good example because I'm like so soft spoken and so reserved, but then when I dressed up like her, people were yelling at me and like saying these like silly things, and I basically just quoted my husband because he's Russian. So I'm just like, what would Dimitri say? He hasn't watched the show, so I don't know, you just do you.
Behind you on the form, to your right, our left, is an elaborate cosplay of yours. Can you talk a bit about that costume?
This is, I think, up to date, the favorite costume that I've made, just because it's so pretty. The character is Haku from Spirited Away, designed by Hannah Alexander. She's pretty well known on social media, but she will take renderings of popular characters from anime or Marvel, DC, all the different fandoms that people have. She specializes in sort of the Art Nouveau, so she basically will just sort of transform their pre-existing costume into her own iteration. I love the movie, I love this character, and I love her designs. And this costume for me is such a good example of the things that I love to do, which is painting and dyeing and sewing. I bought a lot of different silks. I think most of this fabric was white until I dyed it. I got to test out ombre dyeing. I painted all the wave details at the hem. It's a little bit hard to see. I hand painted all of that as well. I wanted it to look like her rendering.
Hannah Alexander's illustration of the Haku character is on the left, and Denise's husband, Dmitry Chukhina, models her cosplay on the right. Let's close this video by looking at Denise's historical reproduction from graduate school, a project in which third-year students study a garment from the costume archive, take a pattern from that historical artifact, and scale it up to fit a contemporary body. In this image, the archival garment is the black bodice on the left, and Denise's reproduction is the navy bodice on the right. This project's pattern making, materials sourcing, attention to detail, and quality of construction provided Denise with the skill set she uses for each one of her clients in her business creating custom cosplays made to measure.
Thank you so much, Denise, for joining me in this inaugural episode of Costume Professionals, Making a Living, Making Costumes.
If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notification of new content, and join me every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern for my open studio stream.